Well, this is the week after Christmas that everything goes back to normal, or sort of normal. But the lights and the decorations, they're all gone. The leftovers have left. Even the resolutions made so genuinely and so intently are mostly gone by January 9th, or so say the statistics. So it's the time of year that if we're thinking about Christmas at all, it's only because of the credit card receipts or the boxes of decorations. They're packed away, but they haven't yet quite made their way back into storage. But, it's over. We've moved on. And in truth, it's hard to say that Christmas really mattered at all, one way or the other. After all, it didn't seem to make a significant difference to our lives or the world. The stress and the friction and the pain of the world is still present, much as it was before Christmas, maybe even more so. Our personal conflicts have not all been magically resolved. All the health concerns, they're still here. The worries we had about our jobs or our lives or our pets or our families, they're all still here. We spent an entire fall in this church thinking about peace, seeking peace, including the weeks of Advent where we lit candles for peace, culminating in a Christmas wish for peace to all on earth. Peaceful. There is so much that could be said about what has happened with Venezuela and what interests are in charge and the implications for the world going forward, particularly as it relates to oil interests. Not to mention what will happen for the people of Venezuela and their government going forward and what it will mean for all of the Caribbean. And protests and vigils have occurred across the United States nationally after an ICE agent fatally shot a woman in Minneapolis, escalating between political factions. As people are injured and even dying. But it's just the U.S., is it? Violence and conflict are continuing in Ukraine and in Ethiopia, in Syria and in India. The humanitarian crisis in Gaza continues unabated. It's almost as if Christmas made no difference at all. And into this world, the mess that it is, come the words of an ancient prophet, Isaiah, who didn't know anything about Christmas. That was after his time. Although he did know something about God's and the ways that God's promises suggested that God would be present in the world. The poem read this morning is the first of several servant songs, as they're called, where Isaiah describes how God shows up in this world. Also, a very broken community. In Empire, some had stayed in their homeland, recovering from this mass devastation. But others spread through the land along the water banks of the Euphrates River. No matter where they were, they felt the impact of this heat. They were a people striving to understand how they came to be in the place that they were, how this exile happened, and what it meant for them. And what we heard read today from the prophet Isaiah was a passage to give hope to a people who felt lost in confusion. That. This year, when I'm reading Isaiah's words, I'm caught by the images he uses of a bruised reed and a dimly burning wick. That's how the world must have felt. And it is how the world feels to me now, all bruised and fragile. The light of hope is dim. And if we would listen to the voices making the most noise these days, there's no room for that kind of weakness. No room for that sort of vulnerability. Or power or strength, you're going to be stomped out. Those at the breaking point are going to be trampled, overtaken. Make way for the losers. And Isaiah says, yeah, that's all true, but don't listen to those making the most noise. That's not how God works. In fact, God is in a gentler business, quietly bringing forth justice. Dim lights are not going to be put out by God, but will be coaxed into something brighter. Plants, reeds, are not going to be exploited for their bruises, but treated gently and given what they need to grow and grow. This is what we were supposed to learn at Christmas, when a helpless baby was born in a very dark and vulnerable place. A dim light does nothing in a bright place, does it? But in the darkness, it can still give you a pretty wide glow. It can be all that you need. And that's the message that comes every year at Christmas time. And it is hard to believe this Christmas message, this Isaiah prophecy. We have very little evidence in the world to work with. And we have this habit, don't we, of assuming that our lives should be lived in the light, and that we don't expect, need, or want darkness to be a part of life. Even though where we live, we spend months with the majority of hours in the dark. I read something earlier this week that kind of amused me. It says, what we have learned at the University of Adversity so quickly fades from memory when a few years of prosperity leave us with the illusion that we are 10 feet tall and bulletproof. We are surprised when shadows surround us, when life feels hard. Darkness then becomes everything we don't know or we can't control or that we're often afraid of. But the truth is, we also know, don't we, we who live in this land, we know that we need darkness for rest, for resetting our internal and biological clocks. When there's too much light, we can't see the stars. Remember how we used to be able to see the northern lights so much better, but now there's all this light that gets in the way? We forget the scale of our being and our place in the universe when we can't see the stars. And we're starting to discover or remember that we need opportunities for our children and ourselves to fail, to make mistakes, to experience sorrow and uncertainty, so that we can build up our qualities of hope and resilience. I'm not suggesting we seek out tragedy. I don't think God wants that for us. But maybe it's okay if our wick feels a bit dim for a while, or if we get the occasional bruise. We know that seeds need time in the darkness to germinate, to find growth. And maybe so do we. If growth begins in the dark, so does the quest for peace and justice too. And what Isaiah says is, in our bruised world and in our dim days, there is still hope. Even if everything seems to be crushed, justice can still be silently, patiently growing. And if we would believe in God, we would trust that darkness is also where God can be found. It's where God's work begins, that new things at some point will spring forth. But because we can't see it, because it is not the loudest voice out there, it is very hard to trust, isn't it? In the church, this is the season of Epiphany, this brief season that takes us from Christmas to Lent. The word comes from the Greek, epiphaneia, meaning appearing or revealing. The Magi were the first in the season. Today we're remembering what Jesus and perhaps through a dove came down and word, strange word, beloved, beloved. I don't know how we say it. Isaiah notes, though, that it is not a one-time thing. When God appears, it is through servants who do what God chooses. And it is the ones that God chooses, in whom God's soul delights, those who God would call beloved. And so that means it is now our turn, as God's beloved, to discover Christ among us. God's presence to be revealed among us. It's not magic, which frankly is a little frustrating. How much nicer would it be if everything was sort of obviously holy? Especially as we watch the news and wonder what on earth is happening to the world. But no, thinking theologically and holily, is that even a word, about our lives takes practice. We practice our epiphanies. And that is our challenge in these days, and is a very, very big challenge in this world, to look past the voices of authority who are making a show of their strength, who are bruising and breaking and extinguishing tiny lights. Our task is to look again, see freshly, feel the love, find the love, what it means to be beloved. And then to find the places and stand in the places that the Celtics called thin, those places where earth and heaven meet, they called them. And regardless of how jaded and how disillusioned we feel, to cling to the place of surprise, to look for the love behind the big shows of anger and fear. Look for the tiny glimmers of light and follow where they lead us. And trust that there are epiphanies to be found. May God help us. Amen.